it's the classic, feeling like you're sleeping next to a stranger, right? We're 3 inches away from your partner, yet you feel like you're 3 miles apart. Now, the difference is for most of us guys, it's about the intimacy, the sex, the passion, right? And when we recognize that we feel 3 miles apart from our wives, they feel 300 miles apart. We don't pick up on it as quickly as they do. Hey guys, welcome back to the TPM show. Today I'm going to answer another viewer or listener's question here. And this one comes from Chris. And Chris sent a message in and said, hey, my wife and I are about to become empty nesters soon. I see a lot of people who become empty nesters have problems in their marriage. Is there anything I can do to help prepare for this next phase of life? This is a great question, Chris, and I see it a lot too. In fact, I saw this early on in my early 20s. I owned a fitness magazine. I owned a private training studio in Santa Barbara, California, and I owned a consulting business all at the same time. So I was crazy and I was busy. But one thing that I noticed, since I had a very high-end personal training studio, so it was a business model. It was a newer concept back then, but you would drive to my location and you would just do your personal training there. And I would see people 3 to 6 times a week on average. So I got to know them really well. Like, people will tell you a lot of things when you're torturing them. And I had other trainers that were working in there. So anywhere between 5 and 6 trainers. So you can just setting the scene. So there's a lot of conversations that are going on and et cetera. And I was working with, again, I'm in my early 20s, but I'm working with people in their 40s, 50s, in that kind of stage of life. A lot of them, I would watch them and witness them become empty nesters. And I remember talking to one woman in particular. I won't say her name, but I remember working with her, and her son was the last one to leave for college. Her son was getting ready to go. And she was in a quandary, a massive, massive quandary. And you could see the anxiety, the stress on her face. And we become friends, right? Yes, she was a lot older than me, but I worked with her kids. I worked with her husband sometimes, but I got to know her really well. And she just shared with me. She said, look, I don't want to be, this is her words, I don't want to be a country club wife. She had spent and dedicated, in her eyes, right, the last 30 years or so being a mom. And she had a great lifestyle. Her husband made good money. She had given up her career to focus on being a mom for the last 30 years. And that was about to come to an end. And she's like, Doug, I've seen what happens to women around me. Like they become these country club wives, basically, arm candy, if you will. She's like, they just wither. And she panicked. And what she did is she separated from her husband almost immediately. Well, actually, what she did is she went on a trip to Spain for 3 months, came back for a little bit, went back to Spain for a year, and then split up with her husband. And she started confiding. She'd come in and she'd train with me when she'd come back to town. And she confided in me that, hey, there's this other guy, and then I met this other guy, and what do you think? And she was looking for my opinion and my approval or what have you. And this time I was I was coaching people kind of on the side, but that's how I got into coaching. This kind of coaching was early on. I had so many people asking me for advice, mainly because I was the person they trusted, right? Because they were with me in this intimate setting of personal training where I'm helping them achieve a goal. They're getting tortured. And so you get to know people really, really well in this setting. And so she was leaving, and she didn't know her husband anymore. Her husband was devastated, right? He didn't see this coming, and it came out of left field. So let's talk a little bit about why this happens, set the scene, and then let's talk about what you can do about it. And hopefully this will apply. Now, this will apply to you whether you're an empty net or you're about to be an empty nester, whether your kids are newborns or your kids have been out of the house for a while. Because the symptoms that I'm going to talk about are exactly the same as I see in most marriages. And you got to understand, at TPM, we get about 2,500 inquiries a month about our programs. So that's a lot. We've been around 8 years. 8 years, guys. That's a lot of inquiries. So we have a lot of data. We have a ton of data points to look at and scenarios that we've heard and seen. And so myself, the other coaches, as well as the rest of our team, you know, we see commonalities. There's just patterns in these situations. And so what's that pattern look like? Well, it's the classic, feeling like you're sleeping next to a stranger, right? We're 3 inches away from your partner, yet you feel like you're 3 miles apart. Now, the difference is for most of us guys, it's about the intimacy, the sex, the passion, right? And when we recognize that we feel 3 miles apart from our wives, they feel 300 miles apart. We don't pick up on it as quickly as they do, right? We may react to it or what have you, but it's been going on for a while. That's been my experience. And I see this play out since my 20s, owning that gym and then everything else I've done. I see it play out as a pattern over and over and over again. Guys just hope it's going to get better, and it doesn't, right? It doesn't just get better with hope. You have to actually be proactive to get in there. And so this distance spreads, and now you feel like your spouse is a roommate with a ring. But her focus, her identity in this situation is mom. Her identity, the reason that she is staying in a relationship with you is because you are both parents to this kid, right? Or these kids or what have you. But in the empty nest situation, let's just assume one kid is still in the house and about to leave. So if her identity is mom and her quote wife identity is, in her mind, she's with a roommate with a ring. She's given up her passions, her goals to raise this family. And she's done it, right? She's almost crossing the finish line, if you will. Now, if there's no spark in the marriage, and I'm going to give you an idea. It's not just about sex. Sex is just an indicator. If you're not having sex at least 2-3 times a week, there's probably an issue, right? So just look at it through that lens. And it doesn't have to be every week, but routinely, your sex life is an indicator of your relationship health. Now, I get it. There's going to be people out there, you guys are going to be outliers. For whatever reason, you or your wife can't be intimate together physically. I'm not talking about you. They would take the same, idea here, right? It still applies. It doesn't have to actually be physical sex to qualify for intimacy in my mind. But you get the idea. We'll use that as an indicator, bell-shaped curve for most of you guys. So now here's this woman who's sitting there. She's like, oh my gosh, my last kid is leaving. My job is done. What does my identity look like? Who am I as a person? And this is why you got the whole eat, pray, love thing that goes on. Women tend to travel a lot during this period. They're trying to rediscover themselves. And as they're trying to rediscover themselves, if they look across the table, the dining room table, or they look across to the living room, and they look at a guy who they married 30 years ago or whenever it was, and he didn't live up to his promises at that altar. And when I say promises, I don't just mean that, did he cheat or anything like that? He could have been the greatest guy, the nicest guy, right? He could have been Mr. Integrity. But what I mean by promises is when a woman says, I do, she's looking in the man's eyes and she's not seeing the man in front of her. She is seeing the man he can become. So your woman knows what kind of man you can become. She's vested in that. She wants that guy to rise, and she's been dying for it. And in this situation, as a made-up example, she's been dying for it for 30 friggin' years, and he hasn't shown up. So she's looking across that table at this guy who is a shadow of who he could be, or a shell of the man he could be. Now, maybe he's attempted. Maybe he's tried things to reach his potential. And if he's doing that actively, he's probably in a good place. But if he's not doing anything about it, then chances are he's complaining about it or he's living kind of an average life. And now she's looking over there and she's going, man, my life is about to change. I'm going to have all this free time. I'm not going to know what to do with myself. And I'm stuck with Mr. Average in a relationship that's not full of sex or passion. Now, I keep bringing up sex. Why? Because so many women read just romance novels. Romance novels are basically erotica. If you guys have ever picked up one of these books, go to your wife's bookshelf and look at a couple books that she's read recently in the fiction genre. Even the historical fiction, there is a ton of sex in those books that are geared for women. A ton, guys. Hey guys, I wanted to interrupt this episode because it's dawned on me that many of you guys aren't aware that we actually have a book on how to save your marriage without talking about it. Now, thousands of men have read it, they've reviewed it, and I want to give you the opportunity to do the same. If you're interested in grabbing it, it's a short read, but it's helped a lot of men just like you. And maybe you're not interested in the activation method yet, but this is a small entry point that can really turn things around for you. Go over on Amazon. We have it priced as cheap as Amazon will let us. And that way you have a resource that you can use right now to start getting some results in your marriage. Now let's get back to the episode. This is the reason I talk about 50 Shades of Grey. We all are familiar with the book 50 Shades of Grey. Go Google how many copies that sold. Guess who was reading those? Almost every woman in America, in Europe, everywhere. So there's a reason that this was such a popular book. It's not because women don't want sex. It's not because it's not something they're interested in. It's not because they don't want to be whisked away. No, they do. They do. Not everyone, but almost everyone. And they want this fantasy. Yet now she's sitting across from Mr. Average, who's not living up to his potential, who's not doing exciting things. They're not doing dates like they used to, date night and things of that nature. They're not traveling around the world together. They're not doing a lot of these things that they did when they first started dating. Now, when they first started dating, they probably didn't have the money to do a lot of these things, but they probably accumulated some money along the way. And now, instead of doing that, they're doing the smart thing. They're saving, they're investing. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but are you being creative? Are you creating romantic interludes? Are you putting notes in your wife's drawer? Doing little things like that. Guys in our community are always coming up with these really clever ideas. And I read about them. I'm like, oh man, that's a good one. I'm stealing that. You got to keep that, you got to keep the freshness there. So if you're finding yourself in this situation, this is where you get to start bringing up the conversation, leading. So I would do this if I was in this situation, Chris, and I was like, okay, we're about to become empty nesters. All right. And I've seen people around me fall, which we all have, right? When this happens, what do I do? Well, what I would do is I would approach my wife. First, I would look at my life, look at my marriage. What would you rate your marriage on a scale of 1 to 10? You can't give yourself a 7. If it's a 7, it's got to be a 6 or an 8. 1 to 10, be honest with yourself. What would you rate it? Okay, write your number down. Really do this, guys. So many guys just listen to this and don't do the action. Just do this. Pop a number in your head, okay? Now, if I called your wife right now, or we sat and had coffee together, me and your wife, and I asked her, I said, tell me honestly, where is your marriage on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being, this is the best marriage, better than you could ever imagined it being. 1 being, this is complete shit. What is she going to say? Guys, if she is a 6 or below, or if you're a 6 or below, you need to take massive action today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Get on a call with an advisor. Do something totally different. You have to, right? You have to take action. Now, after you've done that, or after I've done that, what I would do is now I would schedule a date with my wife. Do something fun. Now, and it could be hard. She could feel pulled, especially if the child's still in the house and you want to spend more time before he or she leaves, whether he's going to college, university, traveling, or just getting a job, right? So you want to do that, but make a date night and plan this out, guys. Don't ask her where she wants to go. Plan it out. And what that could look like, if your marriage is in a decent place, it could look like, hey, babe, Thursday night, I'm taking you out. I need you to be ready by 6 o'clock. Put on that red sundress that you love, and we'll head out. Something as simple as that. She can ask questions, and I like to be coy and play around and not give answers, but it's up to you. Your relationship is going to be different than mine, so and your confidence level with this kind of stuff is going to be different as well. So do that. Now, once we're at dinner, I'm going to bring up the conversation. Like, let's just say our kid's Rick, right? I'd be like, hey, can you believe little Ricky's about to leave the house in 6 months? This is crazy. We're about to be empty nesters. Like, and now I would start creating a dream with her. Like, what's possible for us? I realize over these last years, you have poured and this is where I'll use the hidden motives technique. You have poured so much of your love and energy into raising the family, right? It's been your whole identity. And I want to thank you for doing that. It's been absolutely amazing. And I got to imagine if that was me, right? I'd be questioning, like, what's my next move? What's my next step? What's the next thing for me? And that could be scary at times, right? It could be uneasy, unnerving. And get her buy-in. So she's either going to say, in this case, no, that's not it at all. Now you can get clarity on what it is for her, or she'll agree with you. And if she's probably going to feel seen, heard for if it's the first time you've done it, probably for the first time in your marriage, but seen and heard. And now you can have a conversation with this, and you get to lead that dance of the conversation. And a conversation, it's like being inquisitive, but don't interrogate. Some guys miss this. They become interrogators. Be inquisitive, fun, just inquisitive, like you're a reporter covering the best story ever. I like to, when I'm dreaming with my wife, I like to get in a childlike state, right? Of dreaming like, ooh, what's possible? Like, where would we travel? What could we do? Ooh, now we're going to be able to walk around, have sex on the kitchen table and no one's, without anybody being around, and laugh and joke. And don't wait for her reaction. Just be you and go through it and start setting the tone and helping her create this new identity. Now, if it's me, I want to help her create the identity that's going to be the best for her and me, right? I want it to be a win-win for our relationship. There's you, there's her, and there's the third entity of your marriage. So I want to make those completely compatible, right? And solid. And start dreaming about it. Like, okay, when Rick leaves, that's going to be weird. Like, what are we going to do? What are some fun things that we just haven't been able to do because we want to take care of little Ricky, right? And start playing with that idea. Maybe it's traveling. Maybe it's taking a class. Maybe it's just taking some time off, right? And really get to the idea. Now you're being proactive about the situation. Again, if your marriage was or is a 6 or below by yours or her standards, then you need to be doing something. You, not her, right? This is key. A lot of guys try to change their wives. They don't realize that they have to change first. I can't tell you how many times I hear a guy say, Doug, this is amazing. I started doing the work. After a couple of weeks, I found out she started doing the work too. And your wife doesn't want to tell you, right? Because she doesn't want to say you're right. No way she's going to give up that power. So you got to start doing the work on yourself, right? So 6 or below, start doing the work on yourself immediately. Second step, set that date night. Have that conversation about little Ricky leaving, and then use the hidden motives technique, right? We've talked about that a lot in these podcasts and these shows. Use that to open her up and see how she's really feeling, right? How is she feeling about this? What's going on through her head? She may have already planned an exit, right? She may have thought, well, a year or two ago, women plan things way in advance, guys, that, your marriage isn't working. And so she's going to leave as soon as Ricky gets into college or whatever else it is. But this is your opportunity to change it. This is your opportunity to turn things around. And this is her opportunity where she could share some of that with you, right? She could say, well, actually, I've been thinking about traveling to Spain for a year, or, I've been thinking that you and I really need to talk about our future, our relationship. Or she might be able, more than likely go, I don't know. I don't know what's next. Now, here's a key tip. Don't try to solve the problem for her. Don't try to fix her. Don't solve her, right? Don't go into solution mode. You're there to listen and be a mirror to reflect back to her thoughts and her feelings, more importantly, and then ask questions. Like, okay, I get that. Well, I remember before when we got married, you were thinking about this. Have you considered that again? Or I know that you like to paint, or I know you love to travel, or maybe it's just time. Yeah. Maybe it's just time for both of us just to take some downtime and have some fun together. And one thing I would highly recommend you suggest is you guys got to start dating each other again. Yeah. So you know what I'd love to do is start dating you and figuring out the woman that I married, who she is today. That would be sexy. Let's have real fun with that. Right. And you're putting a suggestion out there for her. We're not trying to fix her, but putting a suggestion out there for her. Right. The last thing you want to do is tell her, you can start going to the gym and losing that weight again, or you can start going to this class and getting better at this thing I think you suck at. Don't be that guy. I know it sounds stupid for me to say to some of you, but for some of you, you're like, oh, I shouldn't say that. Because I'm the one that gets the phone call that has to help guys clean these things up. So don't do that. And make this playful. Make it playful, guys. This is not a business meeting, this date. It's not. This is your chance to turn things around. But no, if you're not going to do steps 1 and steps 2, if you're not going to do those 2 things, then the first step you are going to be doing is signing separation or divorce papers. Because this is such a pivotal time, Chris, as you mentioned in your message, that for so many couples, that this can become the catalyst for somebody stepping out of their marriage and going a different direction, because now they have a reason, excuse, and what was tethering them to the relationship is no longer tethering them. So I hope that's helpful, guys. As I always say, in the moment of insight, take massive action. One action step you could take, if you haven't rated your marriage, is rate it. ask your wife what she would rate it. That could be a really cool exercise to do. Third thing, if there's things you want to hear on this show, any of the 5 territories, self, health, wealth, relationships, and business, those are the 5 territories that we cover inside of the Powerful Man at the base level, right? In fact, this next event, we're doing a whole thing. We're bringing AI specialists. It's going to be amazing. But if you want to hear that kind of stuff on this show, just let us know in the comments or drop us a line. Go over to thepowerfulman.com, where you can also see hundreds of testimonials from men just like you. But you can go over there and leave us a comment on what you would like us to cover and what guests you'd like us to bring on. And we'll do what we can to make it happen. See you next time on the TPM Show.